Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our panel discussion about adapting legal departments to the new normal. So everyone is trying to figure out what that means, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we think it might mean. I would like to first introduce Onnit's SVP of Global Sales, Matt Denouden. He is going to give a quick introduction and then turn it over to our panel.
I think you're on mute.
Matt, we cannot hear you. Are you muted? Oh, there you go.
All right. I guess I have two unmutes to unmutes. Apologies, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. We've been seeing terrific crowds at these events that we've been sponsoring. This is, I think, our 5th in 4 weeks, and we've had the better part of 1,000 folks RSVP and show up together. So it's so nice to bring this community together. I'm particularly pleased that Onnit and Simple Legal are co-sponsoring today's event with Pinhawk, and we have some names that you will recognize as august leaders in the legal ops space. We're so excited to have this really strong panel today. We are going to spend the vast majority of our time with them. I'm going to turn it over to that panel in just a moment. Some of you who are returning visitors to Lean Into Legal Ops, we would love it if you signed up as a member. Really all this means is that you get automated invitations to events like this. So there's no chance you miss them. This is literally our 2nd this week, so there's lots of great stuff going on. Also, Onnit's trying to be of service to the community in a couple ways. You'll also see some information on some free business continuity apps that we put up in place at no cost for our customers and non-customers. So many of them are centered around returning to work and raising your hand and moving work around among your colleagues in preparation for returning to work. So I hope that all happens for all of us in the coming months at the right time. But obviously it's an organizational challenge to do that in a way that's safe and thoughtful and well planned out. And we've got a couple of tools that we think can help. In addition, we're really inspired to see our customers and our prospects defending the path that they had set out before in terms of projects that are coming up. Along with some of our consulting partners, we have put together again at no cost, some cost savings and ROI calculators that folks can use to business case their projects, whether it's with Onnit or not with Onnit. And so there's webinars that you'll see on our website that have been conducted with customers and colleagues and consultant friends about that. So trying to make sure that we're of service in some concrete way. I hope you and your families are all well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rees. Rees, take it away. So good to see you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Pleasure to be here. My name is Rees Morrison. I'm a senior manager at Ernst & Young. I'm doing consulting to law departments and have done that for a long time. I'm very honored to be able to moderate this panel. I'd like to tick off a couple of things. I want to thank Pinhawk particularly and Joe Bookman. He and his team have been doing a whole group of newsletters that are relevant, including one for COVID-19 and one for law department management. Here's how we've organized the webinar for today. The panelists that you see on your screen are going to say a word so that you know something about them. And then we're going to launch into a series of questions, which the panelists have had an opportunity to think about, come up with some comments, and we're going to march through these questions somewhat in order. We also welcome questions from anyone on the call. You can submit them. We'll vet them and introduce them as we have time to do it. We're probably going to march through this so that there may not be that much time at the end. It's a little hard to know. So send your questions in as you can. And with that, I have to point out that the pandemic has claimed one of our panelists. I'm sorry to say that Emily Diamond had to cancel at the very last moment because of who knows what. So we will have a little more time to expand on our comments as we go forward. And with that, I'd like to turn it over, I think, to Kristen, you're first, and if you introduce yourself, we'll just pass it around the horn and then launch into the questions. Go ahead.
Great, sounds good. Thanks, Rees. Good morning, everybody. Greetings from Baltimore, Maryland. I am managing counsel at Under Armour, managing counsel for litigation at Under Armour. Again, Kristen Herber. Our legal department is about 60 teammates. We have about 40 attorneys. My team is comprised of the litigation function, but also the insurance team and our anti-counterfeiting teams report to me. So I manage about 10 folks. Looking forward to the panel. I'm very excited to have been asked to participate, and I look forward to answering the questions and talking about this whole work from home thing.
Colleen, you're up.
Great. Good morning, everybody. I'm Colleen Hankins, and I am at Fidelity. I've been here at Fidelity in Boston for 20 years now. For the first 15, I was a litigator, and then I moved into my current role, which is, it's a mouthful. I'm the head of this Strategic and Shared Services Group, which means I own operations, e-discovery, staffing, knowledge management, program management, all that sort of stuff. I've got a fantastic team underneath me. Our department is roughly 200 people. I would say maybe around 150 lawyers, and then 50 paraprofessionals and admin staff spread across a number of regions, but mostly in Boston. And I too am looking forward to this discussion.
Mr. Miklowitz.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Miklowitz. One of the great things about working virtually is you can be virtually anyone you want to be. So I'm actually the curator for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame today. So I've got my background there as far as my Beatles albums. So other than that, what I really do in the non-virtual world is I work for a company called TE Connectivity. It's mainly a manufacturing company with technology, with being a major product. We're an engineering-based company. Global, between about 75, well, I guess about 75,000 employees. Law department is 200, just as Krista was mentioned. Colleen was mentioned. We're about the same size. So, although attorney-wise, we're more closer to about 100. So I'm kind of in an interesting role. It's legal operations. It includes our process improvement program, which is called TEOA. I also have some responsibility for litigation program management. So similar to what was said by Colleen, I've got hands on a number of things. And during this time period, I'm also even more known as a therapist. So it's to try to help people out in whatever they need as far as staying connected. So that's me. Rees.
Excellent. Thank you, all of you. If we could bring up the slide about the first set of questions, at least. These were circulated among us and discussed. We hope that the 6 of them are going to touch on questions you might like to ask. And with that, I'd like to ask Colleen to tackle the challenging question of the first one, if you would.
Yeah, sure. So in the interest of time and making sure everybody has a chance to speak, I'll cover 2 big challenges. The first one was sort of an obvious one that I think probably everybody faced, and the second one was a little bit less obvious, and we had to quickly pivot. So the first one is technology and equipment. So what we did in February and into early March was we knew or figured that this was coming, as much as no one wanted to necessarily admit it or face it. But what we did was we made sure that we did a scan of the department to figure out who was logging in, well, rather who wasn't logging in from home, what universe of our department maybe wasn't as successful working from home. And then we targeted those folks to understand, did they have Wi-Fi issues? Did they have just remote access issues? What was it? And so we were pretty proactive with that, which was great. And then since that time, we have continued to have ongoing communications and a direct line to our operations team in the legal department to make sure that folks are outfitted with the right technology and, you know, monitors, keyboards, mice, webcams, all that sort of equipment. And that was really critical, and I think pretty seamless. And thankfully, the company as a whole had a strategy and an approach to make sure that folks were outfitted at home, because Fidelity, before this experience, was very hesitant to allow people to have company equipment in their homes, and so clearly we needed to relax that a bit. So that's sort of an obvious one. The other big challenge for us was mail. And we get service of process. We get all sorts of mail. And so with service of process, of course, being some of the more critical, time-sensitive things that we need to deal with. So we have designees in each of the regions. I am the Boston designee, which means every couple of days I get a big box full of mail, and I'm triaging the mail. I didn't know I would do that, but I'm doing it and trying to get things to the right places. I've got a big pile. My husband is upset with me because I've now commandeered a corner of our bedroom where it's the Fidelity mail room now. So that was a big challenge that we weren't really focused on immediately.
Well, we're about to move on to Jim, but may I just ask a question, Colleen? Did you have issues with security of data flowing back and forth when it's going from your home base formerly to the homes of people?
So what, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, Rees. I mean, what we have done are a couple things. So if it is a time sensitive, let's say it's a subpoena that has a short turnaround time, I will use my Fidelity sandboxed application to send the subpoena electronically to the right party, the right group to respond. If it's something that, I mean, mail has slowed down, hard physical mail for us generally. So just over the years, so it's not all that plentiful. But what we've done is we have just I've turned the mail around with I get a stack of UPS labels and I fill it out, and then I put my mask on and I drop it off at UPS, and it's secured and tracked. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I mean, we're not popping things in U.S. mail, you know, just with a first-class stamp, and we're tracking it if it needs to be forwarded at all.
Yeah, and Jim, I know I'm holding you on pins and needles, but one of the participants asked a good question about basically, Colleen, are you scanning much mail there in your bedroom to send somewhere else, or what do you do once you triage the mail?
Yeah, so like I said, if it's time sensitive, I will scan it, and then I will I've got a pile of mail to go back to the office, or most of the time, once I've scanned it, my colleagues have said, go ahead, shred it, and that's what we do. And if it is something that I do need to forward, which has been few and far between, but if it is, again, I use I take the hard copy and I plop it in a UPS envelope and get it out the door. Using Fidelity's, I'm able to access our mail label process, and I print off the label, so it's all prepaid by Fidelity, and I just put it in the envelope, you know, in that plastic part. So I don't know if that answered your question. And of course, if anybody has other questions after this, you know, I'm sure that our emails are probably available at somewhere. So anybody can feel free to email me as well.
Okay, Jim, go off mute and take it away.
Well, until Colleen brought up the mail issue, I didn't really think about that. So I'm glad you did, because now I'm worried about those cookies that Audit sent to me in my office and who got those. So, but I also have two. maybe some of these coincide with what Colin said. The first one would be operationally, how to continue. And that obviously involves technology and more. And, it's one of those things, working in a paper world in some ways, especially in Europe and some of our Europe offices, they don't allow for electronic signatures. So they literally sometimes would have a contract and then would have to go ahead and sign it and scan it back in. So again, operationally, they were used to having a scanner in their office. So this would be part of our deployment as far as technology, was to make sure that they had things such as scanners in their now work at home operations. We want to look at it that way. So I think was one, operationally. But the other one, which I think we've been focusing more on, was the sense of community. Because those who go to offices on somewhat of a regular basis, and now they're not doing that, they lose that connection and that sense of community. And how can you build apparatuses, I guess, to go ahead and still have that sense of community? So for our law department, we're really broken up into 12 different practice groups. As I mentioned before, we're in all places around the globe. And frankly, those folks that got affected first were our workers in China. So they had to respond very quickly. And frankly, we learned a lot from them, as far as how it moved from, into Europe and then over to North America. But some of the things we learned was, again, how do you keep people feeling, number one, assurance of some sort, that, number one, that we're still in business, but also the people I usually talk to, be it customers, internal customers, outside customers, they still feel a sense of connection with them. So I guess that goes also to the technology aspect, but how to now use some of this to still feel connected. So I think those, Rees, would be the two primary challenges that we were facing.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So let's move along. The second question had to do with investments, the expenditure of time or money by management and others. And again, Colleen, we'll let you start off on that topic and move to Michael afterwards.
Great. So, it really, I'm going to be repeating a lot of what Jim said, in that the biggest thing that we have had to focus on once we got through the technology and the logistics is really that sense of connection. And one of the things that I have tried to do with my team, and my team's about 20 people, give or take a few, is really try to maintain some sense of normalcy. So I encouraged everybody, keep your one-on-ones, but at the same time, of course, managing the fact that people's schedules are a little bit different. Things are just off. But by and large, we try and keep our one-to-one meetings, our staff meetings. Fidelity has done, I'm so impressed with what our communications department has done from the enterprise, not the legal department level, but from the enterprise. They put together very quickly an unbelievable communications campaign to make sure that there's a lot of connectivity to the associates. And because of that, we've been in the legal department trying to manage. We didn't want to over communicate and create that type of fatigue for people. So it's certainly a balance, but keep making sure people feel connected. Our general counsel has done a couple of communications. He has I don't want to call it a Twitter feed, but we have an internal portal, and he will post to that every now and again on a managed basis, just trying to make sure that he's reaching out to associates. And the other thing that we have spent a lot of time on is we started a knowledge management program a couple of years ago, and boy, did that prove to be handy in this situation, right? So we have technology tools and processes that we have implemented over the last couple of years. And one of the things that we are really actively trying to do is make material available to people and easy to find. So things like I don't know, I think we might have some law firm participants on this call, but we are taking those wonderful notices that you're sending out and collecting them and making them available to the department in a way that is searchable and retrievable. Same with things like Law 360 has has put out court closures, for example, consolidated. So things like that, we're trying to make that available, easily available to folks. So.
Sounds good. Michael, Jim, misreading.
That's okay. I'll answer whatever you say, Rees. So again, it sounds like Colleen and I almost work in the same company, but very similar. I'll say a couple of things though, what we did, and we actually did it pre-COVID. One was we put together a communications team within the law department, and it's made up of yours truly along with 2 executive assistants. And we have made, I guess, some great effort towards keeping people, again, feeling connected. And we have this theme we call one law. So it's one law department, even though we're made up of these different practices. So what I was going to say about that is that we were fortunate because we already kind of had a cadence going on as far as sending out communications. And we had quarterly webcasts, and now we're making those monthly webcasts. So it will include people maybe from leadership team, but also various parts of our law department. So they again feel like, oh, it's good to see these faces, and sometimes people don't have it. So for fiscal year 20, we had 4 different value drivers that were kind of leading us, and they were risk balance, speed, cost to serve, as well as talent development. And what we were doing with these quarterly webcasts was to kind of like hit on each one of those themes. Well, we found, especially given what we've been facing, that for our next webcast, which will be next month, it's going to be on recognition. So it has to do with talent development. And really recognizing some of the efforts that people have put in prior to COVID, but even now they've been kind of strained to really kind of overcome and what they've done to serve their business customers. So that's been one thing. Now, I will say on having it be a little bit more entertaining, so it's not all dry, part of the communications team said, well, we've got our law department portal. What can we do to go ahead and have people view things to say what it's like working from home? So our general counsel, John Jenkins, said, well, why don't we have people post pictures, but pictures with their pets? So it was really something that was helpful. So it's kind of like a rolling screen on our front page of our law department portal. And you can only imagine some of the things that showed up on that, including alpacas. So we really had a little bit of everything there. But it also helped because it did have that international flavor to it, because people would kind of be showing from different areas of the globe. And it really helped, I think. So we're ready to do our next kind of theme. I think it's going to be creative face masks and what people are going to be, what they're wearing right now, and for that. So that's just one thing that I think we've invested in, going back to that sense of community. On the technology side, it's really interesting. We're pretty much a Microsoft shop. We've been using Skype for a long time, and but we're going to be making the transition to Teams. And frankly, we piloted Teams about 1.5 years ago and did it with a couple of our practice groups, and it just wasn't being used. So we kind of dropped it. Well, guess what? Now it's becoming very, very popular again as a collaborative space to use. So that is now going to become more of a used tool. So therefore, there'll be some training involved with that as far as the use of Teams. So those are 2 things as far as investments. One is kind of our law department portal, our communications team, having people feel, again, connected, uplift them a little bit. And then the other thing would be some on the technology side, especially around the use of Teams. And I will say that has taxed our TIS group, our IT group, because the pipeline through Skype was just getting really abused there for a while. So people were getting dropped, or getting the things where it was the stuttering problem as far as people speaking. So now they've kind of set up now Teams to kind of offload some of that on the Skype. So we're kind of going through that transition right now.
That's good. Now, we've been keeping you silent for a bit. Kristen, We want to move on to this third question. And I think just for the participants and those who are asking questions, we may want to try to move through most of these questions and get the points out there. We can then circle back and take questions more. So, Kristen, you want to comment on that question about managing people and any changes that have been brought about?
Sure, yeah, thanks. I think, just echoing kind of some of the themes that Colleen and Jim have talked about, one just being keeping people connected. I would say that the way I've managed people has been less of a kind of, people are gonna pop in my office and, say, have a sec. And I've shifted more to trying to have regular touch bases with all of my teammates, both kind of as a team and then one-on-one. And what I've found is, so, everyone's going through this incredibly stressful and uncertain time. And I've tried to have more of a personal connection with each of my teammates to try to figure out what they need. I have teammates who are home alone and they may just need 30 minutes here and there to just talk. Others may need, to talk about issues that they're facing, but just really trying to support my team as much as possible, from an emotional and workload perspective. And that takes a lot of time. Like, I would say that, in addition to workload increasing, I'm spending more time having real connections with my team, which is great. And I think is probably one of the benefits of this is just getting to know people in a different way, and just trying to support them in any way we can. We're having some fun, kind of weekly get-togethers as well using Teams. We actually have we're going to be doing some scavenger hunts, which will utilize Teams for people to take pictures and post it, to things that they found. So just trying to keep some normalcy and some comfort and connection during this really uncertain time.
Sounds good. Colleen, maybe you have some thoughts to add on to what Kristen just said.
Yeah, for me, managing in this situation did not change dramatically because my team has been scattered since I took over this team roughly 5 years ago, in Westlake, in Texas, in North Carolina, Boston, so in California. So we're used to it. We're not used. It's actually unusual for us to be together in a room or on a floor. So for us, it actually sort of leveled the playing field in many respects. And I've heard from managers on my team that their teams are actually interacting better because everybody is in the same place. Because we had folks, just a handful, who were actually working fully remote before, and they felt a little bit distanced from the rest of the team, and now we're all in that same boat. So that's a really interesting perspective or development. But that's just my team. I think the department as a whole, the attorney staff, sure, we had pockets of people here and there who would work remotely on a fairly regular basis, but certainly not like this. So I don't want to suggest that the fact that my team has transitioned pretty well, that is a universal experience for the rest of the department, because I'm sure it isn't. But even still, and Kristen, I think you sort of, you touched on this, I guess the challenge for me as a manager is making sure that we are acknowledging and respecting the emotional impact that the last 6 weeks has had on people. And in fact, my team recognized, two of my team members this week recognized that they saw that perhaps I was struggling a little bit, and reached out in a way that was actually quite touching for me. So, we're all, no matter how strong we are, we're all going to crack every now and again. And it is important for us to look out and acknowledge that, and allow, like you, Kristen, I do try and have during my meetings some amount of time where we can just talk and vent and understand what everybody's personal experience is. Again, without being invasive, certainly. And so along those lines, one of the things that Fidelity, again, as an enterprise is doing is encouraging people to take time off, because it's really tempting not to right now, right? Why would I take a vacation day when I'm just gonna go to my living room? And it's just the same every day. Well, the answer is because it's still very important. And it is still something we need to commit to, and we need as managers to model that behavior. So I took yesterday off, and it really wasn't wildly different than any other weekend day, but as I told my team this morning, it felt like I was playing hooky, and so it had sort of an emotional benefit to it. And so I've asked, I sent a picture of my family to my team, and I said, guys, do it. I think you need to. These are weird times. So that is probably the biggest thing, is really encouraging people to not give in to the stress and anxiety, but to recognize it and actually address it, right? And listen to your body. Take some time off and actually unplug. So that's it.
Sounds good. Well, let's move along. If we can change the slide, it will bring up the additional questions we'd like to ask. The first one, I'm going to make a comment and then respond to a question we've been asked. The question here has to do with help from HR IT. The question we were asked a few minutes ago was, what are the advantages of Teams, I think, over Skype or alternatives? And if Jim or anyone else wants to say a word or two about that, that would be fine. The other thing I was going to point out was, at least at EY, as we've gone even more virtual than we were, the firm offered to buy monitors for people up to a certain amount. I gather that has been taken up by many people who need the larger monitors to do their work. So that was partly coordinated with IT, and it touched on all the others. So with that, I'll ask Kristen again to pick up on what's happened there with Under Armour and your collaboration, or not, with other functions.
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm very fortunate in my job that I do a lot of cross-functional work. So I work very closely with HR and IT. From a litigation perspective, we work with IT for litigation holds and collection of devices and those types of things. And then also, we always kind of partner with HR on employment litigation and those types of things. So I feel like the legal department and HR and IT, and specifically my team, always partner very well together. But a couple of examples just of, kind of partnering during this period, touching on something that Colleen addressed, which is developing kind of operational norms during this time. I think, it's really easy to it's really difficult to distance yourself from your office when you're living in it. And so we worked with HR to develop some norms on communication. Obviously they're not set in stone, but guidelines of, not emailing your teammates at 11 o'clock at night, setting the email to go, in the morning, or making clear this is not necessary to address tonight. To just be more respectful of the fact that people are, like I said, living in their office, and it's kind of hard to put some distance between yourself and the office these days. And then, also kind of addressing the fact that even though we're in this kind of crazy period of time, people are going on with their lives. People are taking new jobs, transitioning away from the company, transitioning into the company. And so, we're trying to develop processes to, if somebody's leaving the company, make sure that we get all of their equipment if they're on a litigation hold, or, making sure that they kind of adhere to the exit checklist. those types of things. So, issues pop up, and I'm just really grateful to work with some great teams that are willing to just kind of roll their sleeves up and address the issues as they come. And it seems like there's like a different issue even still almost every day. So yeah, that's kind of how we work together.
Okay, good. Jim, if you would take the baton from Kristen there.
Yeah, and let me first maybe try to address that question. Kristen could probably answer better than I am about the use of Teams that came up. So I would still say we're in the embryonic period of using deployment of Teams. But what I like about it is it has more functionality than Skype in terms of sharing of documents, calendars, tasks, et cetera, like this. So we can kind of more encompassing. And frankly, I got to be honest with you, our use of Skype was without the face. I mean, we were using more just for, conference calls. Like it was just, okay, we're just using this to basically conference people in, but we really weren't using it as a collaborative kind of tool whatsoever. So I think that for Teams, the greater functionality is something that instead of building separate repositories of knowledge and SharePoints like this, can we kind of have it more integrated within the use of Teams? So that's what our hope is, and I'm speaking really out of lack of knowledge. So Rees, I'm going to put a different spin on this because in many ways, within the law department, it's kind of like, how are we coordinating amongst the different practice groups? So, and it's interesting, and I'd be interested to hear also from Chris and Colleen about this. I mean, some of our practice groups are really under a lot of pressure right now. I mean, our labor and employment group, we also have enterprise risk as one of our practice groups. So you can only imagine what they're doing. Where other areas such as M&A are probably a little bit softer right now. And I don't think what I've done very well is to say, wow, can we kind of move some resources around that where there's less activity, can we move? So I don't know if you could, I'm not necessarily prescribing that an M&A attorney all of a sudden becomes an IP attorney. Don't get me wrong here, but if there's a way of doing that. So I've tried to reach out, and I think us who are in operations realize we're the connectors often across the practice groups, and say, where can we help? Where can we help? But we haven't done is probably anything as proactive as far as saying, do we shift resources, even if it's like a temporary shift as far as doing that. So a couple of things I will say though, and kudos to our IT group as well as our HR group, is offering just some basic guidelines. Now I will say a good portion of us office workers, we do work virtually already, but it was simply guidelines to send to people and to kind of help each other as to how to go about. It's simply the use of technology, but also some of the therapeutic ones, as well, as far as how to do that. And the other thing I'll just mention, kind of more within the law department, is I think a number of people feel, I'll say helpless, but they want to help. How can they make an impact during this time period for those who are less fortunate than myself, for instance? So we also have corporate responsibility as one of our practice groups under global government affairs. And so some programs that people can contribute to. So for instance, we have a one-to-one match program already if you make certain charitable contributions. Well, for certain hospitals now, that was up to a 2-to-1 match. So again, it gave opportunity for employees who might not know how to help out, but that they can actually go ahead and make a contribution. And now the company will not only match it, but go a double match or something like that. And then the last thing I'll mention is something which I got to give our credit to, I think it's HR, but other functions as well, was T's actually in a position that they can make some of the devices that are necessary for protection. So particularly around face guards, face masks, face shields. So we use some of our 3D printing capabilities. So at some of our sites that are still operational, and as long as safety is put in there, volunteers, and that includes people in our law department, have been kind of like in the production line to help make some of these things. So I think there's that sense of, wow, we're actually working with the people who really are the ones who are making money for the company, especially the manufacturing side of things, but also feeling that sense of community, but they're also making a good contribution to the overall cause. So those are just a couple of things where I think cross-functionally across the company we've done that I think have been helpful during this time period.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So the next topic is perhaps of some particular interest to the law firms who have called in on this webinar. It's really, have law firms or other vendors helped your department, or as one person wrote in on chat, has there been some tone deafness perhaps by some? We would have heard from Emily Diamond with PNC on this topic. Since she's not here, I will invite anyone who feels like they would like to offer something. I know Kristen's going to tee it up, but Jim, Colleen, if something occurs to you on this topic, I'd love to hear about it. So with that, if I could ask Kristen to start the topic off.
Sure. Yeah. I Colleen and Jim, I think both mentioned, kind of collecting the knowledge of the firms and the information and taking advantage of the webinars, which I've fully taken advantage of. I think that's been a really big, benefit that the firms have been providing, is, kind of those targeted informational sessions where you can, go in for an hour and really feel like you've absorbed a current update. One kind of funny thing that happened was that's been happening is we've had a couple of litigation matters where we've had to collect people's machines to have them imaged or for whatever reason for litigation purposes and discovery purposes. And we had our lead partner, who's very successful litigation partner in a very large firm, driving around from our teammates, we call them teammates, our employees' homes to pick up from custodians the different machines all around the Washington and Baltimore area, which I just thought was so great. He was, perfectly happy to be the one to do that. And that way there wasn't any issue with, chain of custody or anything like that. So I thought that was just kind of a really selfless way to throw himself in and say, I'm here, I'm a team player, how can I help? And I was like, well, we got to pick up like 6 machines all over town. And he jumped in the car, drove up from DC to do it. So I do feel like we're really fortunate to have some great firms that are supporting us. And, I just thought that was kind of a funny example of it.
Colleen or Jim, something occur to you on this?
Nothing that we haven't said. I think our law firms, I think the partnership has been phenomenal. There isn't anything that stands out that I've thought in the tone deaf category where I thought, wow, I can't believe that request is coming to us. Quite the opposite. I think it's been a wonderful partnership. Again, I think we've been inching towards this kind of model for a long time. The remote work, the non-traditional relationships. So it's been seamless in that regard.
So Rees, I will put a different spin on all this and maybe cause a little controversy. So I'd be honest with you, I saw a little bit too much opportunism that was going on there. From, I'll say, those who are not on our panels right now, but service providers and the like, we were just getting flooded with these COVID kind of like seminars. Different service providers say, oh, wow, don't worry about it. We can do your video depositions for you. Like, it just, to me, it seemed overly opportunistic. And I think others of my peers found the same thing. I was just getting flooded with this stuff. So I would say be thoughtful on some of those. And if you're already working with, a client, I get it. What can we do, especially around those that can offer CLE credits? This is, a good opportunity for things that are helpful as far as education, but also a bonus of maybe getting some of the CLE credits. So, that's great. That really works out well. The other thing I'll just mention is, I don't know if others will feel that, but I think there is a little bit of panic out there. I'm reading the same kind of trade magazines that others are reading. Firms that are maybe cutting back on compensation, maybe cutting down staff. One of the things that I raised to flare are those who do like the legal project management, the operational side of the law firms. are they in danger? Because those are the ones I work with. And frankly, we're in a situation right now at T Connectivity that we had issued an RFP looking for productivity-based fee arrangements, alternative fee arrangements, but they were really value-based fee arrangements. And some of those were kind of slogging along. And I got to be honest with you, there's now been a little bit of an uptick in activity in getting those done, because I think there is a little bit of concern about, I need some cash flow here, and if I can do something that is trying to meet your needs, let's kind of make this happen. Now that's with some firms, but other firms, I don't know if they're taking that same kind of position. So I am interested in seeing the impact of what this is going to have on the legal services industry if models change, and what especially working with the customer needs, because let's face it, a lot of the clients, and we're not immune to this, we're impacted by this. I mean, the supply chain is being hit. If we're a manufacturer provider, we're being hit right now. So I want to have our own supply chain, be it with the legal service providers, to still be healthy. But please don't be overly opportunistic. And also, if you are having issues as far as cash flow or something like that, especially with some of our smaller law firms, we want to be able to work with you in a continuing role. So be open with us and about that and see what we do. I will say that it's been impactful with some of our smaller service providers, especially some of our technology providers. We have a couple of AI tools that we're using right now. And I'll be honest with you, I was concerned about, are they going to be able to have the money to keep supporting us? So we did raise a hand to them, say, what can we do to help you? So I think those are other conversations I know that we really didn't talk about, but I think are happening or should be happening if they're not.
Okay, very good. We're drawing somewhat toward the end here, so if people have questions, send them in. But meanwhile, we'll take on this last question, which is a big picture question in a way, and allows us to look down the road. Again, I'm sorry Emily is not here to weigh in on this. We'll start with Colleen on any thoughts here, but Kristen, Jim, you've got some thoughts. Go with it also. Colleen, you've got the mic.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing I'll take the internal piece, because we're having active discussions about the recall, the return to work process. And I don't know about Jim and Kristen, but Fidelity as a company, not just the legal department, but as a company, was moving towards different workspace. The footprint was very different. We were having much more shared, unassigned space. And I don't think that that's feasible anymore. And so we have to completely revamp and rewrite that strategy. With the legal department, generally speaking, we were 1-for-1 in terms of a seat, but that is not the case at all of our sites, and it is, and it's certainly not the case outside of the legal department. Which means if other groups in our buildings need to be 1-for-1, we may have to give up some seats, which means we may have a portion of our department that will have to be permanently remote. So to me, that is the biggest change, is in our work patterns and our work style. And I don't envy our real estate partners who are working around the clock to figure out what it's going to look like when we start that recall.
Colleen, has there been any tentative notions as to when the recall might begin?
Sure, dates are kicked around, but it's completely fluid, and there's no real set date. We're just watching to see what happens with the curve and with the are we going to start going back up again when we relax a little bit of the social distancing? So no, not really, Rees. Yes, we've got models with different alternatives, but I can say this: I think whatever the first recall wave looks like, it's going to be small. Then it'll get a little bit bigger, But I think it's going to be a long time before there's any real normal back to work situation.
While Jim and Kristen are pondering if they want to contribute on this particular question, I'm just going to mention two techniques that EY has done, at least in the practice that I'm part of. One is they've had virtual happy hours, and it's quite interesting. And here we get to see what people choose to imbibe, and even a little bit how much. And it's again, it's keeping community, it's keeping connection, it's squelching bad rumors and so forth. So happy hours. The other thing is, I think out of our Boston office, maybe it was, there's an enormous Trivial Pursuit night on Thursday nights, and hundreds of people competing life and death, of course, for the honor of winning Trivial Pursuit and unseating the champion. So there are many ideas for keeping your folks together even during this time. So I will open it up for more, but I have one question, and I'm concerned. I'll let the lawyers on here advise me if this is improper, but I wonder if any of your 3 law departments have a team member who's tested COVID positive and is on quarantine or whatever. I mean, in other words, has this been real for your law department? So 2 prongs. If you want to comment on this, what's going to change in the future, fine. If not, I'm curious just if you have a real instance of a law department member.
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick on the kind of changing the way we work, echoing a little bit what Colleen said, but I would say that our historically our legal department has not been open. The general counsel has not been open to working from home, even part-time. And I think one of the good things is that we're seeing that it can be done. And so I think there will be more of an openness to that, which I think is a really good benefit. Interestingly, kind of talking about the recall and going back to work, and I have to be honest, I'm not sure about the structure of Colleen and Jim's companies, but we operate retail stores and distribution warehouses. So as a company, we have the corporate employees that we have to take care of, and our corporate headquarters are in Baltimore. I have about 3,500 teammates on that campus. So we're addressing those types of issues, and like Colleen, we have a lot of open workspaces. So we're trying to think through, are we going to have A days and B days? Clearly childcare in schools is going to be a huge issue. So if schools don't go back in session, if summer camps are canceled, that's going to be a big issue with bringing people back to work. But then also we have distribution warehouses where we have people who are, in a big open space near each other. We also have retail stores that we're going to be, that are operated, throughout the world that are subject to different shutdown orders or openings. So there's a lot of moving parts with regard to our re-entry, kind of going back to the workforce that we're having to think through. So it's just it's really complicated. And like Colleen, we're, looking at dates, but who knows?
Rees, I'll just put in just a minute here too. I think as far as the overall strategy of the company and our particular value proposition for the law department, that has not changed. So ours still is to enable business growth and protect revenue and profit margins. How we do that, I think this COVID crisis has been a shock to the system. And I always try to say, how can you turn a negative into a positive? So some of the areas that we were looking at before, be it shared services centers, maybe more use of alternative legal service providers, centers of excellence. I think and also doing more work probably offshore for us, maybe in India. It's allowed, I guess, for us to revisit these more. And a lot of it has to do with that metric, which I'm sure every law department has, which is, what is your cost to serve? And typically that is, what is your overall legal budget, legal spending as percentage of company revenue? Well, most companies are likely feeling that pinch as far as revenue right now. So therefore, the cost to serve is feeling that pinch. So I don't necessarily say this is necessarily a positive thing, but I am saying that it's giving us an opportunity to revisit some of this. as far as how do we still deliver on our value proposition, but maybe do it in more creative and innovative ways.
All right, we are drawing near. We can certainly handle the questions that have come in, but you're welcome to send any others. And I'll just now open it to the panel to comment on anything they see fit about this.
Yeah, if I may, Rees, there was something, I'm pretty sure, Jim, it was you that raised the question of how to redeploy people who maybe if their work has slowed a bit. And there's one thing I just wanted to mention. Thankfully, a couple of years ago, we started a talent exchange within the legal department that gave us an infrastructure or a vehicle to put work out to the department where we either had, well, generally where we had a gap in resources, and whether it was a discrete project that was going to be one and done after a couple weeks, or maybe it was an ongoing piece of work that would be a small piece of work, but never ending. And we have a mechanism to put that out to the department and get volunteers to try a new area of law and get a little bit of exposure. So we have that, which is great, and we can leverage that right now as people might have some capacity. Now, of course, it's always a little challenging, especially in a situation like this where it's just a weird situation, right? People may not want to actively raise their hands to say I have capacity because A, that could change at any moment, and B, sometimes it's just hard to articulate or to admit, right? But we have that, and I'm happy to talk to anybody if you wanted to build a program like that. It has been enormously helpful to us as a department, and I'm hoping that we will be able to redeploy some work due to this crisis using that mechanism. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thanks, Colleen, for bringing it up, because as I say, it's an area which I think we had done some as far as, but not as structured as what you just said, as far as that talent. That's awesome. That's great. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. I'm coming from it from a different angle because we're a smaller department and very lean. But we have seen, a shift and, folks needing more support. And so I appreciate that insight, Colleen. It's really helpful.
All right, excellent, and thank you all for taking part as panelists. We have a question. Some people might like to reach out to you individually. Email, you can decide on your own if you want to. I'm mindful of Jim's comments about hearing quite a lot from people, but we'll let you decide. I believe Onnit's going to help us circulate this and make it available as a recording or otherwise. But with those comments, I'd like to thank all of you for calling in. I hope this has been useful. Thank you very much for you panelists, and thank you for Onnit and Pinhawk for organizing that. I think with that, I will turn it back over to Josie or whoever's running this to conclude.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rees. Matt Denoughton here. Thanks to all the panelists. A really excellent discussion. We appreciate your time. Josie, do you want to just foreshadow the next coming up events with Lean Into Legal Ops?
Sure. So after this event, all of you will receive an email with some information about what we have coming up. You'll also receive these slides and other relevant information about the panel discussion. We will have a link to the recording as well in case you want to revisit anything. So please expect that in the next couple of days. And thanks so much for joining us. That concludes our webinar.
Thank you. Have a good day. Be safe.